The story begins with the fact that an ordinary girl, named Estelle, was the illegitimate daughter of the Duke Emerald. The baby was a common mole. However, Estelle became a ray of light in that black world. The girl awakened the divine power, which was not equal in the empire. Due to this, the Duke was able to strengthen his influence in society. The girl's father and sister ordered her to behave well and not create problems. They did not want Estelle to spoil their reputation. It was a habit for Estelle. She just had to go to the light. The girl was constantly felt by an outcast because the sisters often raised her hand, and in every way offended and humiliated. One of the sisters was constantly reproaching the girl that she considered herself too important, as many people praised her and called her holy. Estelle believed that if she made enough effort, then the father and sisters would still accept her. Every day the girl suffered her eyes and disgust. Although Estelle was on the threshold of death several times, she really wanted her family to change her attitude to her. In the blind faith, the girl lived for several years. After a while, a miracle happened, and Estelle's have changed completely. The sisters pleaded guilty in excessive rudeness and hoped for a peaceful and polite relationship with the girl. The sisters asked Estelle to forget all the images they had previously caused. The girl and no idea had whether their relationship was sincere, but these few words were enough for her to apologize. A man named Rebirth became very gentle and trembling to Estelle and even confessed to her in love. The girl decided it was a reward for her perseverance. At that time, Estelle felt in the happiest person throughout the empire. However, one day Estelle was disappointed in everything. She did not understand what they did with her. A frightened girl prayed to the sister of Flanders and her father to pardon her. The girl was full of horror because she was sacrificed to the monster. Estelle was desperately asking for help, but no one listened to her. Even the Reddit, who confessed to the girl in love, ignored her. The man turned and left, and it was too cruel. Estelle was left alone with its problem. A frightened girl realized with horror that no one would help her. The devil stroked Estelle with her cold and nasty hands, saying that people are like shadows, and they are so easy to betray each other and think only about themselves. From the very beginning, the devil did not meet the pure soul that was in Estelle. For such a rare victim, the devil was ready to fulfill any desire. Estelle was in the palace of the devil Gienna. The palace was huge, mighty, and very strong. Near the palace and inside it was scary and creepy. The outstanding sounds were constantly present and frightened to death. The evil, which flew to Estelle, suggested that they stop because it was a posture. Since the 600 years after the sacrifice, the demonic herself have caught badly about the girl. The soul of Estelle was destroyed and soon had to die. The souls of the criminals were tormented in the Gienna Palace for 10,000 years. The unclean thought that they paid too much attention to the girl. Despite such power and purity, the main character has exhausted her strength in 600 years. The demon considered it as a posture and started to laugh. Estelle thought that she would die soon, and it was true. The demon did not want to release the young beauty at all, because she realized that she would never see such a pure soul again. The devil admired Estelle because after all the torment she was still shining. The uncleanness wanted to extinguish the light that came out of the girl as soon as possible. The demon has decided to say that while the innocent soul was suffering in Hyen, her enemies lived a happy life. The devil even showed the girl fragments of happiness of her former family. Smile one by one showed incredibly happy moments of people who mercilessly gave her for eternal suffering. Estelle only lowered her head. People got happiness in exchange for the life of Estelle. The girl saw what Reddit was happy with her sister Mariota, and young people were even preparing for a wedding. Then the devil showed the girl her sister Flanders, who was waiting for a baby. Flanders played a lush wedding immediately after she was chosen by the Holy Holy. Estelle watched the young people became incredibly happy. Both sisters already had their own family, and it seemed like only joyful worries. The girl so much wanted to be happy, but it was not destined to be. No one worried how the unhappy Estelle suffered, but the girl asked the demon to silence once after. Sari offered a young girl to take revenge on her abusers. The devil's eyes were lit, and she suggested sending the girl to the happiest moments of young people. But Estelle did not understand why she got there. Most of all, the evil soul wanted Estelle's soul to extinguish forever. The devil suggested the beauties to make young people suffer and crush them. The young Estelle was fated to die, and the poor suggested that she finally wanted. She demanded that the girl agree and said she wanted to revenge. Estelle's eyes were lit with bright red, and she wanted pain, death, despair, and crying people who sent her to such long and painful suffering. There was nothing left of the previous Estelle. The girl's soul was so crippled that she raged and wished the horrible and bloody revenge which, in her opinion, would bring her pleasure. The demon touched Estelle and gave her the blessing of the devil. Estelle became the first holiday to be blessed by the devil. The uncleanness said that when the girl opens her eyes, she would see a special gift in front of her. The devil wished the young beauty of happiness and luck. The power of the great empire was divided between the imperial family and the 6 dukes. 6 dukes received precious eyes that symbolized each family. The most mighty in the empire was the Garnet family, which had enormous power. The symbol of good health is the Diamond family, which emitted prosperity. Representatives of God and religion were the Emerald family, who had a blessing. The power of justice went to the Sapphire family. This family emitted enthusiasm. The managing magicians were amethysts. They owned the abyss. The trusted angels and observers of the law were the Persidot family. They radiated the glow. The power of 6 dukes was stronger than even in the imperial family. However, those who wanted even more appeared. Their pathetic greed led to the devil. As a result, the most noble soul of Saint Estelle was sacrificed to their greed. These were unhappy and very difficult times. The events took place 10 years before the sacrifice. Flanders Emerald spoke with Estelle, forcing her to stand in front of her. 2 sisters considered Estelle an ordinary prostate in which dirty blood flowed. According to the girls, they were much higher and smarter, so without any reproaches of conscience humiliated the poor girl. Marriott Diamond constantly supported Flanders when she was mocking Estelle. One day the girls mocked their sister. They could not even imagine how the girl became the majestic of the Holy Empire. The love and attachment of the Duke's Emerald, the noble holiday, the glowing star, that's what they talked about Estelle. The girl has always been surrounded by a lie. For the family, it was nothing more than a common man and a theft, which stole the blessing of Emerald. But there was another person, that is, a child, who was on the side of Estelle. The girl wanted to meet him that day. From one thought that Jusen would go, Estelle immediately became lonely. Jusen Persidot was the sole successor to the blood of the angels. The duchy heir had to carry out a ritual of awakening blood, and of course, Jusen had to do it. But because of the incident during the ritual, he needed to go to pass Eden's testing. Estelle, when she saw the boy, was quite happy, but wondered if the preparation for the departure was completed. The child said that the test would begin the next day. That DI girl stretched out a bag. The boy was embarrassed, but thanked her sincerely. The girl thought that the baby did not really like the hotel. She wanted to please Jusen with her favorite chocolate before leaving. The boy ate a goodies and smiled because all that gave him Estelle was delicious. The young people did not even have time to talk about how the boy came to the maid and ordered him to go to gather immediately. Jusen had to go for 10 years. The girl wished him successful trials and returned whole and unharmed. The maid dragged the boy sharply and ordered him to follow her immediately. Estelle escorted the boy with her warm and gentle look. The young lady did not even know that that day and goodbye were the last. The girl was constantly praying for Jusen and asked God that the baby's future would be beautiful and happy. Estelle considered herself naive and stupid because that day she sank into hell. The girl did not have the idea as something similar could happen to her family, and they all became so fierce and heartless. For such a rare donation, the demon promised to fulfill any desire. Estelle wanted to pay full to those who caused her grief. The lady wanted to give her abusers the most horrific and ruthless revenge in the world. After a while, the young girl of Aurelius could not understand where she was and why her body was not listened to. She knew one thing, that had to return to the estate after meeting with the crown with the prince. Estelle approached Aurelius and said they had not seen themselves for a long time. The girl lifted her head and saw the one that had to be dead. Estelle was surprised and asked how to see the living dead. Aurelius was very frightened and could not understand how the holidays could use dark magic and where they were. The girl looked at her sister with horror and then got a blow on the full. Aurelia asked to stop and begged her not to touch. Aurelius Garnet was the daughter of the Duke Garnet, and she was gripping that she was on the girl's side like her younger sister, but in fact betrayed her. Behind Estelle was a demon who wanted to take away the soul of Aurelius. She also wanted to bring the girl to despair. The uncleanness wanted to get the soul of a beautiful young girl as soon as possible, but she began to ask Estelle not to do it. The young brunette felt extremely creepy and afraid that she was about to come. Meanwhile, Estelle said that she got into hell because of her worthlessness and endured there 600 years of torment. Estelle was anger, and the girl wanted the girl to feel all the horror and past all the circles of hell. In the hyenas, the demons were mocking people as if they were their toys. They were forced to follow the broken souls. Aurelius desperately asked her to save her, but cold but angry worldwide wished a completely different. In an instant, the girl really believed that her girlfriend would save her, but it was her false thought. The arms of the molds began to approach the fragile Aurelia, and then she realized that it was the beginning of the end. Estelle most wanted everyone who wanted her evil to feel the pain she felt. Estelle plans to borrow the body of Aurelius. She wanted the girl to watch all the hyena. Estelle really settled in the body of Aurelius. One morning, she woke up in the Duchy of Garnet. Having considered herself, the girl was convinced that she really became her sister. It has been 3 years since Estelle was sacrificed. They stated that she had accepted martyrdom for the victory of darkness. The status of 6 dukes has not changed. None of them learned the truth. Everyone was silent. Estelle praised herself for her ingenuity because he was a good solution from his sister's body. Aurelius Garnet was the younger daughter of the Duke of Garnet, the most influential family in the empire. No one dared to treat her badly, and nothing was expected from her. It's time to revenge in a new body. The events took place in the estate of the Garnet family. During the breakfast, a small case arose, and the maid of the rune broke the plate. The son of the family was a little angry because this behavior of the servant was often. The guy complained to his father about the girl's beza because she was constantly falling and spilling. The man tried to hint his son to take his hands and behave with dignity. A frightened maid in a hurry collected a broken dish. Aurelius came to mind. The girl did not know how to behave because she had no idea how real Aurelia would have reacted to such a mistake. Hamilton was a cousin of Aurelius. The girl noticed that the boy had a very terrible character. The father asked his daughters well, being after the accident. Leah laughed and said that all was well. Aurelius saw the prophecy map. It was the power of the devil that predicted the future. The map showed the approaching tragedy. The girl realized that something horrific would happen and decided to take advantage of this opportunity. Subsequently, the young man still decided to order the maid of the rune. The girl tried to explain that it was a mistake and she inadvertently broke the plate. The rune asked to be mercy and started crying bitterly. But the guy did not want to hear anything, believing that low-grade people are all the same. Suddenly, Aurelius entered the room. The brother did not delight his sister's arrival and asked her to leave. Aurelius immediately explained that there was no intention to go and she wanted to fully order her brother, a hypocrisy. A few minutes later, the guy was in the devil's shackles. He pleaded with his sister for help. The Runo was watching what was happening. Aurelius made a decision from that moment to be careful, because it was still in the ordinary world where people were very defenseless. Aurelius leaned over her brother. The boy looked at his sister, not understanding who she turned. Thanks to the evil power, the girl survived the approaching death, and she told the guy about it. Aurelius offered Hamilton 2 options. The first is just to die from shortness of breath, the second, to become a slave. The girl, like a demon, looked at the boy with her steel look. Hamilton trembled, afraid to say something. Aurelius proudly lifted her head and explained that it was all the dependent on his choice. The girl was crazy about her brother, recognized her mistakes, and was ready to accept punishment. The sibling broke out his sister, who would go to his father immediately, kneel, and take all the blame. Aurelius harassed. She did not understand what the guy was talking about, because she only advised him to die. According to the sister, his brother had no right to tell someone. Aurelius suggested that Hamilton wanted to extend his worthless life and suggested that he drink her blood because he would remain a slave. He would remain him forever. The girl asked the boy to think carefully about. The frightened young man leaned to the puddle of blood and had already put his tongue to drink. Aurelius considered her brother pathetic and worthless. However, the contract was concluded. The fear of the guy was completely. He did not know what to expect him. Aurelius grabbed her brother and said with a smile that from that moment his soul belonged to her forever. Meanwhile, 2 men were approaching the Gienna castle. One of them suddenly felt darkness. Another man was certain that the darkness was hiding, but he did not feel a drop of darkness. One of the men was Jusen, the high judge of the empire, the star of the Persidot family. The man could not believe that his servant was still wrong. It seemed quite strange to the man. Jusen suggested that the darkness was so strong that he could not feel it. A subordinate man could not believe that something similar could exist in the world. It seemed to Jusen that he was wrong and became too susceptible because of stress. Jusen's servant said that 3 years ago, Estelle was killed in this castle. Jusen took himself for this case and could not forget about it. The man tried to convince the lord that it was not his fault, and he could not prevent the death of Estelle. Jusen suffered a lot because he was incredibly sadly sad about Estelle. The young gentleman watched the holy from afar and restrained for 10 years. Men did not know that in this place could happen and decided to be careful. Jusen was convinced that the worst disaster that ever happened in Hyene was approaching. The servant shrugged and had no idea what they would do in this case. The young man was ready to deal with anything, risking everyone. Suddenly, Jusen saw a piece of cloth and bent to lift it. Meanwhile, the maid combed Aurelia. Subsequently, the maid suggested that the lady choose clothes. The runner's girlfriend warned her so that she would be careful. The girl reminded the colleague, which was Aurelius. The rune was a carefree young girl who believed that a sweet and good girl lived inside Aurelia. She even noticed how the lady began to change for the better. Aurelius was nervous as if it were her first time, but everything worked. She wanted to proceed with the Rungja memory, but saw the sincerity of a girl who screamed of the desire to serve. Aurelius retained the memoirs of Runa because of her gratitude to her. Subsequently, the girl was thinking about the use of runes as a contribution, and finally the time came. Aurelius planned to kill his whole family at lunch at the Duke. The rune came to the lady and reported that the windows of Enrique had returned from the kingdom of Rodin. Aurelius was glad and decided to prepare. It was necessary to go hello to your father. The rune wondered in the lady why she so suddenly wanted to see Viscount. Aurelius was not surprised at all that the maid had reacted so much. There was no strong connection between the father and daughter between Viscount and Aurelia. On the contrary, in the past, Aurelius accused her father of death of her mother. These were the little true feelings that the girl briefly showed Estelle. At that moment, Estelle was looking for a way of reconciliation. Over time, Estelle Viscount Enrique became only another person who could be manipulated. The butter was very surprised when he saw the master's daughter and suggested that something had happened. Aurelius, smiling, replied that she just came to say hello. The man was quite surprised and literally frozen on the threshold. Then he froze and asked the girl to go inside. Enrique was a Garnet family diplomat. The girl admired her father and noted that Aurelius was really very similar to him. The difference was only one. His honest soul shined brightly. Aurelius was even sorry to use a man. The father, seeing his daughter, was quite surprised and asked what he has such a hurry. The girl bowed, smiled, and greeted her father. The daughter told that until her father was, she thought of her mistakes. The girl apologized that she made her husband worry. Enrique knew Aurelia too well, and he thought that she had something he needed. Aurelius whispered that she would like to say goodbye to her grandfather for the last time. She lowered her head and said that she was unknown when her grandfather would die, and she would like to apologize to him for everything that was. Enrique suggested that his uncle first. The man was intrigued by his daughter's behavior. After a while, he organized a meeting with Earl Rotten. Earl made a compliment that it became more beautiful, and soon it would become the most beautiful in the empire. Earl Rotten was the heir to the Garnet family. Externally, he was a pleasant person, but got his status because he sacrificed the devil. The girl could not believe that the man was actually like that. Aurelius had a request. She really wanted to visit her grandfather before the banquet. Earl Rotten, thinking, said that nothing would work. Enrique asked Rotten to make an exception for his daughter and see him for a short time. Since the doctor said that anyone could not let anyone, the Count only spread his hands. Enrique once again asked the Count to assist the grandfather and grandchildren, because the elderly man loved Aurelia much, and this meeting would only benefit him. The girl lowered her head and said that she'd done a lot and would like to apologize personally. Rotten assured that his grandfather's health has recently been very shaky. Suddenly, Hamilton intervened in the conversation. The guy was on the side of Aurelius and confirmed that she was her granddaughter's granddaughter. Rotten surrounded all sides, so the man gave up and agreed to organize a short meeting. Soon his granddaughter was near his grandfather, Duke Torn. Only 3 years have passed since their last meeting, and it has already become so weak. Aurelius very much wanted to check if the man was still capable of something. Aurelius took a husband from her hand. The end promised to be very interesting. As a result, the Duke of Thorn was not even ordered. The man was the only one who was responsible for the fact that Reinhardt's empire had been terrified. From the very beginning, the empire flourished, correctly distributing the balance between the 6 dukes and the imperial family. However, the balance was imprisoned by the duke, and it was from his guilt that the ruling family was destroyed. Reinhardt has since fully immersed in hell. According to Aurelius, the man has long been gone to go to Hyena because everyone was waiting for his death for a long time. Aurelius leaned over the old man's body and wished him a damn demon. The girl wanted the man to feel the pain of all innocent people who shouted at his fault. Soon the young lady left the room where her grandfather lay. She said that he really rejoiced in her arrival because he opened his eyes and said something. Aurelius made a long pause. The men looked at her and expected the continuation. Then the girl said that the Duke Thorn spoke clearly and politely. No one could figure out how it happened, and Duke Rotten was quite naked because he was guilty. Aurelius's father explained that his daughter could not be mistaken. He looked at Ratine's brother and said he had to rejoice because his father woke up. Ratine's voice trembled, and he suggested that the forecasts of Galton's doctor were false. Aurelius suggested discussing events when everyone gathered at the dining table. The rune often focused under the feet of Aurelius and made sure that the lady would feel comfortable. Many maids drew attention to Aurelius that day, became more good, attentive, and polite. Even Baroness Lan, managing the maid of the Garnet family, was very pleased with the behavior of the lady. The girls started talking and laughing. Mrs. Lancrit was to know what the Duke of Thorn said. The young lady was convinced that Aurelius would soon become an empress, so even her behavior became different. Enrique asked Baroness Lan to stop meaningless chats. The man thanked the young lady for his curiosity and hinted that he would be up to his daughter's upbringing. Mrs. Lan worshipped and apologized for his rudeness. Aurelius assured everyone that nothing happened. In fact, for Aurelia, the words of Baroness Lan did not matter because it was not a drop. The family gathered at the festive table. Duke Rotten asked the Dr. Galton to enter. The man was a personal doctor of the Duke of Torn. The doctor wanted to report that the state of the Duke had deteriorated. Enrique wondered how serious his father's illness was. The doctor truthfully told that the old man remained no more than a week. Aurelius turned her gaze to Galton and asked if he was confident in his statement. Rotten looked at a young lady with misunderstanding, because Mr. Galton was a personal doctor of his grandfather, and he could not be wrong. Aurelius strictly lifted her gaze and whispered that her grandfather told her that he wanted to live a little longer. The young girl put a knife on the table. This knife was in her grandfather when she came to visit him. Aurelius said that the knife was made of magic metal. Even a drop of poison could cause such a reaction in the old one. The girl then accused the Galton doctor of charlatanism because the Duke of Thorn was clearly disrupted. The doctor looked at Aurelia in surprise and began to convince everyone that the girl's joke went too far. The young lady said it was not a joke, and the whole thing was inherited. Aurelius said that if my grandfather was really pooling on someone's order, then the safety of the Count, the heir, was in doubt. Enrique ordered immediately to grasp and interrogate the doctor. Mr. Galton swore that he was not aware of the poison. Aurelius explained that they just could not grab a doctor because the traitor was among them. The poison was made of marijuana flowers that grew in the south. The toxicity was quite small, and if not taken for a long time, the effect disappeared. Moreover, it should be carefully mixed with food, quite a little. The estate had only one person who could do it. Aurelia loudly stated that it was Baroness Lan, who personally took care of the Duke. The woman was immediately grabbed. She began to shout that she was not guilty and asked to let her go. Murder in the estate of Garnet was a terrible case. Aurelius looked at her uncle and asked if he agreed with her, rotten as if he had gained water into his mouth. His body began to shine uncontrollably. The fact that poisoned the Duke of Thorn shocked the whole family of Garnet. Everyone tried to find the culprit, but Baroness was silent to the last, claiming that it was a mistake. Lan was waiting for her to save her rotten. Aurelius believed that the woman would be lucky if she continued to remain silent. Then the Duke would die without any witness. But it became pointless since Estelle changed his grandfather's fate. My father noted that his daughter had grown up and changed. He approached because he wanted to overcome something with Aurelius. The man looked at his child and asked how she learned that the Duke had been poisoned. The man could not believe that his daughter had such awareness and was able to identify the poison. The girl looked at her father and said that she was famous for such things from Saint Estelle. Enrique tried to convince her daughter that he was not her business. The girl lowered her eyes and confessed that they were both not interested in it. Aurelius asked her father not to worry, and assured that nothing would happen, that his reputation would shake. Enrique was not worried at all for his honor. He couldn't leave his daughter like that. The husband suggested that she go to the kingdom of Rodin as soon as possible. Aurelius replied that she didn't want to. The father slammed his fist on the table because he was his responsibility to protect the girl. Enrique tried to convey to the daughter that if she became the duchess, then the pay for that day would definitely come. Aurelius thought that his father hinted that Rotten would kill her. The girl was quietly wondered if she would poison her just like her mother. The young lady knew well that it was Count Rotten who killed her mother. The girl did not want to run anywhere, because she realized that Rotten would do her own way. Aurelius reproached her father that he was running away. The daughter looked at her dad and realized that he tried for her. Aurelius doubted whether to worship the enemy correctly. Enrique did not imagine what the girl felt and did not even want to know. The daughter was desperately asked if she would be happy because her father never thought why she went. There was a farewell ceremony with Duke Torn. Jusen did not want to go there, but suddenly changed his mind. The man kept a piece of fabric from the dress he found in the warehouse. He wanted to find the owner. Since the warehouse was in the territory of the Garnet family, Jusen was going to look for the owner of the dress there. The servant wondered what they would do if they did not find a girl. Jusen recalled that they should kill her. Being sacrificed and receiving a gift from the devil, Aurelius sewed brighter than everyone. Watching the balcony for everything that happened, the young lady heard something about the great Duke of Jusen. The girl seemed to be frozen in veins. She couldn't believe that she would finally see the boy. It was a very long-awaited meeting. The boy grew up, matured, and became a real man. Previously, the boy looked like a little cute puppy. Once upon a time, Aurelius received letters from him, but it was much better to meet. If not that situation, she would have been greeted with him for a long time. Aurelius was well aware that Jusen should be especially cautious. Suddenly, the girl felt his gaze on herself. Her body ran through her body. The family of the great Duke Persidat was the reincarnation of angels on earth. Their mission for more than hundreds of years was the destruction of the great demon. This was the basis of the contract to help them survive. It was impossible to meet him without consequences. Aurelius very much wanted to come true that they did not know each other, but one of them had to die. Aurelius went to the kitchen and stretched out the made chocolate for guests. The servant was quite happy and praised the lady for her culinary talent. The young lady asked to pour chocolate on the molds and cool it. Jusen, seeing Aurelius, immediately said he didn't expect to see her. The Duke was with the Earl of the Median. The young gentleman felt the sweetness of Aurelius, so the man was sure that the dessert was ready. In fact, it was not just the preparation of chocolate, but a kind of black magic that sealed the soul. The chocolate was with Aurelius' blood. The young lady was convinced that Jusen was unlikely to notice it. Aurelius rejoiced that she would end with fashion people. The girl turned to Jusen and said that she usually made a servant of chocolate, but at that time she decided to do everything on her own. Aurelius looked at Jusen and wondered for what reason he visited their palace. The man looked silently. The lady was still waiting for the answer, but the man turned silently and left. He was followed by Count Median. The girl seemed very strange to Jusen's behavior, and even thought that he recognized her true personality. Aurelius refused to believe it because from the standpoint of light and darkness, its rank was much higher. Aurelius realized that Jusen did not know anything until she saw her use magic, but the girl promised to behave more carefully. Earl Median asked Jusen's thoughts, because the man looked too thoughtful. The Earl asked if His Majesty did not use the eyes of justice. Jusen said that even if I used it, he would not be able to feel the magical power. The man was not fully confident, because the great demon is able to deceive even the eyes of justice. His Majesty could not understand what happened when his eyes met with the eyes of Aurelius. The man felt something changed. He even seemed as if he was another person. The young gentleman also felt chest pain. Now he aimed to look at Aurelius well, because she seemed suspicious to him. After the arrival of the Grand Duke, the whole family was collected. Duke of Amethyst, Abyss, Duke Emerald, Blessing, Duchess Diamond, Prosperity, and Duke of Sapphire, Enthusiasm. Smiling, Aurelius gave the guests chocolate candy. The girl was greeted with Reddit and Marriott, but thanked they visited a farewell ceremony. Young people were passionate about the culinary skills of the lady. Aurelius said that she put her soul in a sweets and praised them. The girl happily watched the young people tasted the crank candy. Even personally watching the friendliness of young people, the heart of Aurelius did not hesitate, because everything was in the past. Suddenly, the young lady was shouting. It was her aunt. She grabbed the girl by her hand and called to go with her. Amelia happily watched the guests one by one. The girl was not sure that everyone tried them, but her aunt stubbornly pulled her somewhere. The woman dared to hit the girl and literally began to twist her hands. She immediately suspected something strange because Amelia never prepared chocolate. Also, the girl's behavior became completely different, and it was suspicious. The woman looked angry and angry. She put the girl on a chair and tied her hands. The aunt considered the niece a high-dimensional viper because she handed her mistress at her back. The woman looked closely at the girl. Ever since his childhood, Aurelius has made the attention of her aunts. An angry woman exclaimed that she was worth killing a girl as a child. Since her aunt was very busy, she believed that Aurelius was too lucky. She ordered the girl to sit and think about her behavior and not to raise any noise. When the woman left Aurelius, she was only abused. After the case, the woman went to Rotten, and she reported everything. The man was very happy. Make sure that Aurelius would no longer interfere with them. Rotten was ready to put his plans into reality. In the meantime, the Rune was glad because she had already carried a blank tray from chocolates. She was sure that the guests were appreciated by Aurelius's efforts. On the road, Runa met Mr. Jusen and Count Median, who also wanted to try candy. The Rune apologized because a few minutes ago the tray was full. Jusen watched the guests appetizingly tasted candy, and he also became wondering what they tasted. Suddenly, Rotten reported everyone about the end of the ceremony. It is time to talk to the head of the Garnet family, Duke Torn. The priest entrusted the soul of the Duke of God. Enrique could not understand where Aurelius. She had to hear the bell that meant the beginning of worship. My father thought that something had happened to her daughter. Rotten, looking at the pale Enrique, asked what was the matter. Enrique said that he was worried about his daughter's absence. Aurelius was not one of those who would go at that moment. Rotten knocked her brother on his shoulders and suggested that it was difficult for the girl to accept his grandfather's death. The man also had the idea that the girl was crying somewhere. Rotten asked her brother not to worry, assuring that the girl just wanted to be alone. It is time to make a statement about the next heir to the Duchy of Garnet. Count Rotten was to become the title. The Duke has already appointed the Count with his heir, and all family members agreed. It was also reported that the heads of other families should contact the man as the Duke Garnet. Suddenly, Jusen raised his hand and interrupted the speech. The man wondered why Rotten was in a hurry to take the Duke. Jusen was undoubtedly convinced that it was impossible to make a statement immediately after the funeral. The young gentleman saw no reason to make such high-profile statements simply in the estate. Rotten said his father had died and they would mourn him for a long time. But he also said that despite the fact that it was a sad event, they could not carry mourning forever. Suddenly, Aurelius entered the hall. She asked her to say goodbye to her grandfather. The girl said she was late because she had to calm down. Earl Rotten almost fell through the ground. He looked at a young lady with a horrific look but could not understand how she could get. Aurelius said that when he heard the sound of the bell, she wanted to come to the moment, but her heart could not calm down the words of her aunt. She took her grandfather's hand and whispered that she wanted to pray for her grandfather for the last time. Aurelius wanted to read the prayer of Saint Estelle. None of the audience could understand why her prayer. The girl explained that Estelle was the most respected Holy Empire. Estelle upset enemies, but not God. Therefore the girl asked not to deny her prayer. Aurelius kneeled and began her prayer. In the prayer, Aurelius asked God to forgive them all the evil thoughts, and to bless all who gathered, as well as send people to the right way. She also asked to direct the feet of enemies to the path of despair. The prayer was long enough, and all the guests tried to pray with Aurelius. At the end of the prayer, the girl took her grandfather's hand and kissed her. Duke Thorn suddenly opened his eyes. A few days before the farewell ceremony, the servant brought a letter from the Garnet family addressed to the Duke of Amethyst. The guy was convinced that it was there that he would be able to meet his destiny. The servant was surprised by such a prophecy and asked the master who precisely protruded him. The Duke of Amethyst showed his finger and believed that he could predict the future. The guy was finally convinced that if he attended a farewell ceremony, he would be able to meet the one who is more powerful than Estelle himself. The young man, watching Aurelia, realized that this girl was his fate. Rotten was stunned by the fact that his father was risen. All present could not believe their eyes. Aurelius felt the heartbeat of Earl Rotten. The man was very afraid that the truth about poisoning would become known. People whispered and asked each other whether it was a holy power. Jusen was shocked. For the last time, he saw such a beautiful radiation in Saint Estelle. Aurelius smiled and suggested that during his prayer they were blessed by heaven. In fact, the girl received such a powerful power of darkness from the devil in 600 years of suffering. Even if the glow was false, no one would know about it. Aurelius did not even dream that she would return to the life of the saint, but she was convinced that she would use this power as weapons. Only by demonstrating the powerful power of Estelle, she could remind of the crime against her, and then people will continue to live in fear. Young people could not believe that the blessing of God had waited. They even thought that it was the birth of a new saint after Flanders. Aurelius noticed how Flanders had been naked. The girl's strength was very small because she received it by sacrificing Estelle. Enrique stood in front of his daughter and ordered everyone to get away. He apologized and reported that Aurelius's health was weak and it was time for them to come back. People wanted to approach Aurelia closer, but Enrique shouted again without giving anyone a passage. The father wondered if the daughter was feeling well, because he heard that the holidays were pressing on her. Enrique did not want to listen to unnecessary chats, so he grabbed his daughter by the hand and asked to follow him. The man shouted and ordered him to prepare a carriage, because Aurelia had to be taken home immediately. Aurelius wondered if the father was not going to visit her grandfather. The girl said that even if she had bad, she would still not ask for worry. She looked closely at her father and said that they were not quite close. The daughter explained to her father that she was a little awkward. The man understood everything and asked the girl to go to rest. Aurelius has fallen in her past. Once, Count Rotten explained to her that if she wants to become part of their family, she should pray without a break. Then the demon broke into the girl's subconscious and whispered that sincere prayers finally came to her. Sari was ready to give Estelle her love. The girl shouted desperately what she didn't want. Aurelius woke up. She was thrown into cold sweat. The maid noticed and asked the health of the lady. Aurelius assured the flea that all was well, explaining that she had had horrors. The lady suggested that such a dream had dreamed through yesterday's events. She wondered what happened later. The fleece, with passion in her eyes, said that the Duke of Thorn was looking for her. The maid asked Aurelia to go to the Duke as soon as possible. When the girl put herself in order, immediately hurried her grandfather. The Duke was very pleased that he finally waited for his granddaughter. Aurelius hugged the old man and said she was very worried. The man had no idea had how much his grandson could develop her strength so quickly. Aurelius said that thinking about him, she sincerely prayed with all her heart. The Duke Thorn firmly pressed the girl to himself. He sincerely thanked her. The power of Aurelius was much greater than the power of Flanders. The body of the Duke of Thorn not only recovered, but also younger. And the man said directly to his granddaughters and thanked his sincere again. On that day, Aurelius shortened Hamilton's life. Therefore, the Duke's body was rejuvenated for 6 months. The young lady needed Torn's trust, and she did not have any other choice. The granddaughter confessed to her grandfather that she did not know exactly what had happened, but rejoiced that her grandfather woke up. The man wondered how he could repay. He asked Aurelia not to be ashamed and express his wishes. The Duke Thorn promised his grandson that he would do everything she wants. Thinking a little, Aurelius asked her to break the engagement with the Couron Prinheim and to agree on marriage with the great Duke Percidot. The man was surprised by the desire of his granddaughter. In fact, it was not easy to break the engagement. Moreover, Aurelius herself wanted to marry Couron Prince. The Duke Thorn still decided that this was not a difficult task. In the end, it was not a great need to approach the imperial family, but the man wanted to hear the reason why Aurelia made such a decision. The girl explained that she wanted to be a member of the faithful Grenade, not the Empress without influence. Aurelius wanted to be the pride of a family that shone on her. The symbol of the Garnets was grenades. However, their loyalty belonged not to the Selenite dynasty or the people, but only their family for the sake of prosperity. Aurelia did not want to be just a lady. The man closed his face with his hand and confessed to himself that he was very mistaken on his granddaughter. The girl has changed a lot over a long separation. Aurelius said that not so long ago there was an accident. She almost died. She wanted to change her life. Grandpa began to regret her grandson, but she convinced him that all is well. The young lady confessed that she wanted to go the way of her grandfather. The man was stunned by this decision of Aurelius and asked where she would like to start as part of the faithful. At first, the girl intended to find the one who wanted to poison her grandfather by enveloping her family's heart. She promised the Duke that she would surely know whose hands are the right and will make him accept the most horrific death from the possible. The Duke Thorn was at first frightened, but he really liked the course of the girl's thoughts. A smile appeared on his mouth. Then the man realized that the grandson did not joke at all when she said that she wanted to become a true Garnet. The Duke believed that the decisions of Aurelius were much better than the decision of her stupid father, Enrique. The Duke of Thorn aimed to follow Enrique. The girl's plans were first to visit the Baron's lawn. My grandfather wanted to assist his granddaughter and promised to contact the Quran printer as soon as possible. The Duke assured Aurelia that she had nothing to worry about. The man gave Aurelius the will to do everything she sees fit. The girl thanked politely. Then his grandfather looked at her and asked why she wanted to marry Jusen. Aurelius's response did not wait long. The girl explained that if she marries Jusen, they will be able to capture the great duke. Aurelius said everything I was glad to hear her grandfather from her. She said that unlike others, she only thought about the benefits that their family could gain. The current Persidat was so bad that all the direct descendants died 13 years ago. Aurelius assured that when she and Jusen married, Garnet will be able to absorb Persidat completely. Aurelius wanted the pomegranate to shine stronger than all the stones. Grandpa was very liked by grandchildren, and he even had a lot of mood. Although the girl said it, in fact, she did not want to destroy the Persidat family who was not her enemy, especially Jusen. However, Aurelius realized that sooner or later she would face him. The girl wanted to leave it until the end of revenge. Leaving her grandfather's room, Aurelius faced Count Rotten. The frightened man was barely able to ask if the girl came to visit her grandfather. The lady smiled and reported that her grandfather had allowed her to interrogate Baroness Lan. Aurelius has not yet, but hinted to a man who could have planned another murder. But Rotten told the girl something. According to him, the hired killer and Baroness poisoned into the estate. Aurelius wondered if the woman was dead. Rotten said that Mrs. Lan was alive, but barely breathed. It was all obvious because Aurelius had taken the curse of immortality before Rotten took the Lan. Enrique approached her daughter and asked if she really wanted to become a member of the faithful Garnet. The father looked angry and thought he did not understand that Aurelius did not understand what it meant. Enrique was desperate to explain to the girl that she was stepping on a dangerous way. Aurelia denied her father and told that she wanted to do everything she wanted. Of course, the father tried to stop his daughter because the Harnett was allowed to do the dirtiest things for the sake of family privileges. Enrique once again explained to her daughter that his brother and courtiers would not be behind. The man was sure that his grandfather would not protect Aurelia. The girl looked at her father with understanding because he was worried about her, but she had already decided everything. The young girl sharply pulled her hand out of her father's hand. She was ready to lead the family of Garnet while it would not cost it. The girl told her father that if he did not support her, he could just return to the kingdom of Rodin. Enrique was not invested in his head that his child thought. He even thought it was revenge, and he was completely right. But the man meant revenge on the mother of Aurelius, although in fact it was a different revenge. Aurelius had many things and said goodbye to her father. Turning, she assured him that she would not change her mind. After sitting in a carriage, the lady ordered her to be brought to the palace. Enrique, along with the fleece, stood and looked after the carriage. Aurelius felt a lack of someone else's body. The attachment of Aurelius did not disappear to the end. Despite everything, the girl hated her father. Estelle was difficult to feel it. Aurelius arrived at the Reinhard Imperial Palace. How long was Estelle there? Everything around was very aged in 3 years. When the girl was herself, sometimes she came to talk to Oppenheim. It was difficult to call young people a friendly relationship, but they could be considered friends. When Aurelius left the carriage, she was met by a young gentleman who asked her to go on a carriage. Aurelia had to walk on the etiquette, but since the crown of the prince was in the Bells' palace and it was not close, the girl was allowed to go on a carriage. The young lady was upset because she even wanted to take a little walk. In fact, in accordance with certain rules, Aurelius should obtain the permission of the Oppenheim to terminate the engagement. She wanted to do her best to express her respect. After a while, climbing long stairs, Aurelius could not understand what was happening to her body. It was too weak. Magic could not be used next to the palace, and the girl was upset. The young lady faded, and the man who accompanied her suggested that he still go on a carriage. Aurelius denied and reported that all is well. As the knight said, the girl's body was not in better condition. On the road, Aurelius met Oppenheim. He politely gave the girl his hand and invited to the carriage. The man had no idea that the lady was so worried about etiquette. Aurelius did not know if it was indeed sarcasm. In fact, given the usual Aurelius behavior, it was probably sarcasm. The girl explained that her high dimensionality was in the past. The man suggested that you first go inside and then start a conversation. After a while, young people arrived at the prince's crown. Bells. Oppenheim alone brewed delicious and aromatic tea. Then he politely handed it to Aurelius. The girl thanked and said that it was not necessary to do it herself. The prince reminded that Aurelius once told that she would like to drink tea that he would give, not a servant. The girl had no idea what Aurelius did with her husband. Without giving in a surprised look, the young lady in silence took a pot of tea and began to taste, but the tea was too bitter, and it could not be drunk. Aurelius put a pot on the table. Oppenheim noted that the girl had drank little, and asked if he was stopped. The girl did not understand what the crown was talking about. The man explained that she asked herself to brew. The girl felt deep inside the love of Aurelius. Corin Prince was happy to do anything for Aurelius. Just looking at the radiant soul of her husband, the girl realized that she did not see such a beautiful and pure soul. The young lady suggested that Corin Prince led a righteous lifestyle. She realized why Aurelius loved Oppenheim. Aurelius got up from the table and hinted to the man that he knew everything from the letters. She apologized and realized that Corin Prince was shocked and indignant, but still relied on his help. The girl looked at her husband and asked to cancel their engagement. Oppenheim asked such a sudden, impulsive solution. Aurelius replied that she was still not worthy. Aurelius said that not so long ago, an accident happened, and she regretted her sinful past and wanted to start a new life. For that reason, the girl wanted to cancel the engagement to avoid the mistakes of the past. Aurelius added that Oppenheim was also profitable, because after cancellation of their engagement, she intended to become the head of the Garnet family. Aurelius suggested that in the future, a man emperor in return for his help. The man looked desperately at Aurelia because she directly suggested that he become her dog. Corin Prince Oppenheim was the last representative of the ruling dynasty. Despite the fact that after the death of the emperor it has passed for almost 10 years, he still could not take the throne. The reason was simple. The 6 dukes left in power did not convey his ascent to the throne. Thus they tightened the lace and immobilized the Quran print to make it a hand-dog. But Oppenheim did not give up. The man was angry. Aurelius invited him to worship the Garnet family, and it was shameful. He exclaimed that the Duke of Thorn and Aurelius were the same, because for them, the emperor, nothing more than the duke's puppet. The young lady asked Oppenheim not to complain, and suggested that in the event of a rejection of her proposal, try to correct the situation. Aurelius explained that not only she, but any of the dukes can laugh at the Corin printer. The man had nothing to answer and only clenched his fists. He asked Aurelia that she wanted to say it. The young lady explained that her husband was not worth angry when it was necessary to resolve the issue of a cold head. Aurelius also added that whatever she suggested, he was guarded to perceive it as a monarch. The man laughed and recognized the girl's right. He realized that instead of complaints, he was worth thinking about strengthening his power. In any case, the Oppenheim realized that everything was really changing. The man said he even thought about what Aurelius said. All the attempts of Corin Print were in vain. He suggested that the girl be honest with each other, but asked what she really wanted to talk about. It even seemed to a man that Aurelius's goal was greater than becoming a head. The young lady said she wanted to head the Garnet family and destroy other dukes. In this case, there will be only 2 shining stones in the empire, Garnet and Selenite. Selenite statue embodied the imperial dynasty that chaired 6 dukes. The proposal of the new government was only Garnet and Selena. Oppenheim thought and considered the chances that Aurelius would become the head of the family. After thinking about the situation, Corin Prince realized that if the plan failed, he would lose nothing. However, it seemed to the man that Aurelius would still get his. Oppenheim looked intently at Aurelia and asked why she needed it. The young lady put a pot slowly, still warm tea on the table, saying that it doesn't matter. Corin Prince said he would not participate if his subordinates are in danger. According to a man, if you need to spill a lot of blood, it is better to restore the status on your own. It was a person's response with a noble soul. Aurelius vowed the great world that she never thought to cause people evil. The young lady asked the Koran prince if such an answer had arranged. Oppenheim and Aurelius shook his hands because the man still accepted her proposal. The girl promised that he would soon send an official letter of cancellation. But Koran prince Volked that he did not want it. The man explained that if Aurelius wanted only Garnet, then they had no reason to break the relationship. Oppenheim was well aware that in order to become a family head, there was no need to cancel the engagement. Such a man's response was unexpected for Aurelius, because she was convinced that Koran prince hated her. As it turned out, Oppenheim hated Aurelia, because she was repeatedly offended, but since she apologized, he changed his mind. The girl tried to reach her husband and claimed that he did not understand her. The man, in turn, was certain that it was Aurelius who did not understand him. He did not want to stay lonely. Koran prince knew for sure that if she allowed the girl to leave, then he would regret it. Koran prince took the fragile hand of the lady and kissed her gently. The man also asked a little time to win her heart, but it was not part of the girl's plans and she could not allow it. Oppenheim decided that if Aurelius wanted to break the engagement, suggested that she sue. According to the law, it should take 6 months before the gap. Koran prince believed that such a term would be enough, and if during this time he does not get the girl, then he will retreat. The judicial showdowns have always been difficult for both sides, but the man seems to be afraid of it. The girl even rejoiced that in the past, real Aurelia was able to twist the head of the Oppenheim so much, although he gave a little. When the young lady came out into the yard, she heard a sharp noise. She turned and saw that the bird fell and wounded. Her condition was critical, and Aurelia realized that the bird would soon die. Still, the girl could not hold back, and considered the bird a lucky one. It didn't take much power to cure such a small creature. Aurelius wanted to help the poor bird, but Jusen approached it. The events took place that morning. The Duke Jusen spoke with Count Median for a cup of tea. The Count was to believe that they should exclude Aurelia from the list of suspects, because that day she showed her capabilities. The Median believed that such a huge and pure power was a rarity, but Jusen was not sure, because the great demon could still imitate the holy power. He even hinted to his colleague that the divine power could be false. But Count Median could not believe that such divine power could be forged. The Duke of Jusen's intuition suggested something, but he could not understand what it was. The Count once again asked the Duke if Aurelius was really who they were looking for. Jusen was inclined to believe that he may be wrong, but the man had a bad anticipation. The Median watched how worried Jusen was. The only sense of the Duke's life was the destruction of darkness. 13 years ago, Jusen fell into darkness and killed his whole family. Moreover, his wound could be healed, but he lost his last hope, Saint Estelle. Earl Median assured Jusen that he would carefully watch Aurelia. Since the girl was Garnet, the man realized that there would be some obstacles with the check. But Jusen wanted to check everything himself. On the same day, the Duke came. It was a short letter with a proposal to marry Aurelia. Count Median, reading the letter, was shocked because the girl was a bride of Koran prince. They went to gossip that young people had to be cancelled soon. The Graf was still concerned about Aurelius's decision. Jusen reassured the Median because it was an unofficial letter, but just a question to find out his opinion. Jusen believed that it was a great opportunity to watch Aurelia. He was ready to think about her proposal. Median Count has thought that young people could really marry. Jusen laughed and said that, in this case, he would have the most beautiful bride in the world. But the Earl did not consider it funny. After a while, Aurelius met with Jusen, and she thought that her husband was going to meet with Koran prince. But Jusen had no reason to do so, and he frankly said he had come to see Aurelius. The young gentleman laughed and asked the girl whether she was not at times suggested to marry. Jusen seemed seriously tuned and came to see his future bride. Aurelius decided that the preparation for the wedding had already begun. The girl could not think that the power of the Duke Torn was so great. Since everything went according to the plan, the young lady was very happy. Aurelius apologized to Koran prince and thought that he was probably very surprised by such a proposal. Jusen said that the apology was not needed. The man wanted to hear the reason for such a sudden cardinal decision. Since young people had never had a novel, he was wondering why Aurelius wanted to marry him. The girl could not openly confess that she prepared a trap for her husband. She needed to persuade him. The young lady admitted that she was fond of Jusen's justice in the fight against darkness. She said she considered her husband an ideal partner and could completely awaken her potential. The man was stunned. Suddenly, Jusen noticed behind his neck an Aurelius wound, and he suggested cure her. But the girl replied that she did not want to waste her valuable power on the little things. His Majesty was amazed because it was the words of the real saint. Aurelius had no idea had a wound on her neck. The girl suggested that it happened at the ceremony. Jusen suggested cure her. He understood that he was not the level of Aurelius, but could also use holy power. Aurelius began to worry, and she thought that she would reject it, and Jusen would notice it. The girl made a step back and said she didn't want to do a hassle. But the man was too persistent and wanted to heal the wound of Aurelius. The girl closed her eyes because she was preparing for the worst. But there was a miracle. The man healed the wound, and there was no trace left. Everything went well. Jusen smiled, glad that he could heal the girl. The man could only use force in direct contact, although he did not prevent it in advance. Young people said goodbye. Aurelius sat in a carriage and went home. The median immediately asked Jusen's opinion about Aurelius. His Majesty, without answering, ordered to contact Garnet and said that he accepted the offer. Count Median looked at Jusen with distrust. The man also warned the Duke that he was careful, because the harness would be high, dimensional, and after agreeing once, he would never get rid of her. Earl Median once again asked the Duke of Jusen if he really thought of getting married. His Majesty looked at the Count and reminded that he was going to follow the young lady. The Duke plunged into his thoughts. When he treated Aurelia, he noticed something strange, and it did not give him rest. The rune came to the room to Aurelius, and happily reported that she had a response from the great Duke of Persidot. The servant smiled and said that His Majesty agreed. Aurelius wanted to take possession of her husband quickly under the pretext of marriage. But the rune also reported that a letter had come from the palace, which stated that Coran Prince refused to cancel the engagement. Aurelia did not expect it to be so difficult. 2 marriages could at the same time cause dirty gossip. Fortunately, the Garnet family had a great influence, and the girl realized that there was no point in worrying about the opinion of others. The rune was desperate. She did not know what to do because 2 men were talented beauties. The maid was sure what happened because her lady was very good. Aurelius was set up that everything would be the way she wanted. The girl asked the servant to leave her alone because she wanted to relax. Left alone, the young lady thought why the Duke Jusen so easily agreed to her proposal. Although Aurelius could use demonic power, she could not even feel it. The girl thought that there was something else in that body. She became painful, and she could not activate darkness. The body of Aurelius refused to do so. The girl lay down on the bed and thought if it could be somewhat special in the body. The rejection should be stronger. In any case, the strength of Jusen has already come out. Aurelius tried not to think about it. Aurelia fell asleep, and she dreamed of a strange and not very pleasant dream. Estelle struck a very young Jusen face and asked him why he wanted to give up his life. The girl tried to convince the young man that everyone had something good. Estelle was justified that she did not sell the boy for several silvermen, did not starve, and did not treat the homemade cattle. Estelle could not match the young man's parents because only they loved him more. But the girl asked for his father and mother to live a decent life. Tears performed in the eyes of Jusen, and he agreed. Estelle wanted Jusen to promise that he would surely overcome all the obstacles, and after that they would meet again and will be all right. The guy made a promise and asked him to wait. Aurelius woke up. She did not have any idea why she dreamed of Jusen. The girl thought it was because of his strength. She has not dreamed such exciting dreams for a long time. The room included the rune and politely greeted the lady. Aurelius asked the servant to announce Hamilton that she was going to take a walk with him. After a while, a confused man was already waiting for Aurelius. He was so nervous that he could not sit, and his sister seemed no hurry. Soon the girl came, and Hamilton immediately asked why she suddenly called him. Aurelius ordered her brother to take a knife and warned that he would soon need it. The frightened man did not understand what his sister wanted. Aurelius reported that in the evening, Hamilton would be her toy. The girl immediately warned that she did not cost herself to be done. The sister also added that the brother could complain quietly and curse her. Aurelius wanted to find someone who poisoned her grandfather. Young people went to Morton Estates. They were met by a butler who reported that the estate was closed and added that there could be not being located. Aurelius knew it well and promised that she would not touch anything. She asked permission if she could go a little because she wanted to check something. The Bogretsky allowed to look at everything quickly. Hamilton could not understand why they came to the Baroness' estate. The man also noticed that Aurelius was upset. The young lady told her music sore her soul. She wanted to call the ghosts. Hamilton felt terribly from the herd. Aurelius wanted to find the truth hidden in the soul. A few minutes later, a baby appeared in front of the young people, but only Aurelius saw it. The young lady greeted the boy. The girl learned that Lan was Baron Morton's second woman, and his eldest son was a child of his former woman, and was the main heir to the family. For this reason, Baroness took care of her baby's fate. She decided that her son should have the right to inherit. At that moment, the woman noticed the eldest son of her husband, who admired the lake. It was a pretty banal story. Lan pushed the boy into the lake. The baby sank, and it looked like an accident. Hamilton listened to Aurelia, and his heart seemed to have frozen. A spooky story made a man horrify. Then Aurelius said that the baby died because of the stepmother's ambitions. Of course, it was unfair. The boy who died became a ghost, and the girl wanted to show him Baroness. Although Baroness Lan was silent, Aurelius was sure that it would make her to speak. Hamilton considered the girl a real heartless demon. Aurelius just smiled back. The young lady turned to the baby, claiming that he had been killed by a stepmother. The girl wondered if she did the same with her. Aurelius asked the young man if he would like to leave the reality that made him cry. Aurelius promised to help the baby. The boy asked to let my stepmother about his misfortune, and he was ready to do everything that the young lady wanted. The girl went to the estates of the Garnet family. The security stopped her. The men were interested in the purpose of the visit. Aurelius politely explained that she wanted to see Baroness Lan. The guards were looking at each other. Men were believed that such a high-ranking lady did not fit such a horrible picture, but Aurelius assured young people that everything is fine. The guards reported that Miss Lan was very stubborn and did not tell anything. The man unlocked the door and dropped Lady to Baroness. The guard added that there was nothing to expect from the woman because she was silent even during the abuse. Aurelius approached Lan. Instead, the woman only asked to kill her. She just prayed to do it. Aurelius smiled and was about to tell the woman about her plans, and was convinced that she would change her mind to die. Aurelius put her hand to the woman's face. Lan could not understand what the girl had done with her eyes. The young lady asked Baroness to look forward. Next to her feet, the woman saw the boy who drowned. Mrs. Lan seemed to have thrown the whole body. She looked with horror at the ghost of a dead baby. The boy said he was very sad for her. The frightened Baroness began to shout in her voice. Aurelius wondered in a woman who was wrong. Then she looked closely at Mrs. Lan and said that her son was so important that she mercilessly killed an innocent baby. Baroness could not understand how Aurelius learned her secret. The woman said that the Count would definitely protect Yuka because he promised her. The young lady was convinced that Lan was even more naive than she thought. Aurelius doubted that the Graf, who was ready to kill his own father, holding back his promise. The girl also threatened Baroness Lan that, in the case of silence, she will not leave her son alone. Cold-blooded Aurelia thought to give Yuka that soul, because in this case, Baroness could not be so carefree until death. The young lady also assured the woman that she would fall into the bottom of Gehenna. The Baroness Lan was agreed to everything, only asked not to touch her son. Aurelius agreed, but in exchange for a woman's life. Mrs. Lan lowered her head, but still accepted the proposal. The agreement was concluded. According to the contract, Aurelius had to pick up the life of the lad. Hamilton entered the room where Lan was located and killed her. Aurelius felt happy, and she knew for sure that Yuka would live carelessly. The events of that day shocked the whole family of Garnet. Baroness Lan killed the second son of Ella Rotten. All the evidence was against the Graf. Rotten was frightened and realized that someone had seriously decided to substitute him. The man justified before his father, who was not involved in his poisoning. The Earl said that there was no idea about Hamilton's plans, and therefore could not do anything. The Duke Thorn called his son and suggested that he rise and join the meal. Rotten was very happy. Aurelius noticed that the Graf looked as if he were going to get wet. The girl even thought that she overestimated him. But the revenge of Aurelius has not yet been completed. Once, after all, she wanted to torment Rotten until it loses everything, because it would be more fun. The girl wanted to see his torment in hell. A glass of wine that was supposed to reach the Rotten fell and crashed. The man was nervous because Hamilton spoiled everything. The Count was tormented by the Lady Lan did not tie Aurelia more. The young lady dispelled all the doubts that no one noticed the holy power. She rejoiced that Rotten was such a futile fool. The Graf has a plan. He wanted to deal with Aurelia as soon as possible. It was necessary to go to the people who got up in his way as soon as possible. The man dreamed of the murder of Enrique and Aurelius because the family wanted him. The incident shamed Earl Rotten's reputation. Garnet did not view him as a sole heir. The question was whether the Duke would give his place to the son who tried to poison him. The Duke even thought of giving place to his disliked younger son, although even if he was not accepted. Thorn thought a lot about it. Aurelius was only glad that everything was under plan. From that moment, Aurelius was going to lower Rotten's count in hell. The young lady approached the rune, who wanted to remove on the table. Aurelius asked her to help her prepare for the exit. The girl wanted to see her grandfather. The young lady realized that her grandfather was suffering and he needed his granddaughter's support. Suddenly, Aurelius saw her father. The girl thought that something had happened because she seemed to be waiting for her. My father really waited for her daughter because he wanted to tell her something urgently. Enrique wondered what the girl was thinking about increasing security. Aurelius decided that her father was afraid that they could attack them. The number of guards was limited, and the girl did not imagine how the father was about to increase their number. Enrique worried about the safety of her daughter. Aurelius thought that his father realized that in a much greater danger than she. Aurelius still refused to increase the number of security and said that she would stand for herself and asked her father not to get into her business. But the man became angry and attacked her daughter with claims that she did not understand her parental feelings. After calming down, Enrique bowed his head and confessed that he was very worried about his daughter's safety. Enrique was convinced that there was a lot of trouble because of him, and the girl needed his help. The man tried to reach Aurelia. The girl realized that if she continues to refuse, then her father would not have. She agreed, but did not want to be limited in actions and asked to put only one person to her. Enrique promised that the Rechak came. Rechak was a knight of the divine moon. Judging by the records, he was the strongest knight in the Garnet family. Aurelius did not have that she would do if she would really put that knight. Aurelius stretched her father's ring, which she bought by accident. Aurelius told that it was an indirect. She thought that he looked like a man's hair color and insisted that he receives a gift. Since the size of Enrique was much larger, the girl suggested not to wear it, but always carry with her. The man began to consider jewelry. He saw such a beautiful stone for the first time. The father also promised his daughter, which would definitely wear a ring. The man immediately reported that he would no longer return to the kingdom of Rodin, as he left the post of a diplomat that day to be with his daughter and defend her. There were few who could threaten Aurelius by force. Only the great Duke Jusen is the king of the demon tarantula, the Duke of Raffles and the Chafron Simnik. But the girl couldn't say it to Enrique. The young lady was warned that if everything continues, he would have to make her father his associate. The girl was sitting next to her grandfather and scrolling everything in her head. The man wondered what his grandson thought. The Duke Thorn listened carefully to Aurelia because she came to talk to him. The girl smiled and said that she was thinking about what to start with. She hoped that her grandfather was not surprised by her words. Aurelius asked the Duke to close her eyes for Rotten's misconduct. The man was quite surprised. The grandson understood the disappointment of her grandfather, but tried to convince him that the Graf was still useful for their family. Aurelius once again asked to forgive her husband for the sake of the Garnet family. The Duke did not restrain himself and wondered if Aurelius knew that her mother was Rotten's enemy. The girl smiled and waved her head affirmatively. The Duke could not understand why her grandson asked for Rotten and added that the man was angry than anyone else. Grandpa even said that when he dies, he first visited him. Aurelius shared with her grandfather that she was very evil on Rotten and wanted to take revenge on his mother. Since the man was not replaced at this time, he needed she. The Duke was surprised because his grandson had never been that.